Hey, welcome back to the channel. What if I told you that a tiny silver coin once worth just 3 pence could now fetch up to 250,000? From forgotten pockets to world record auctions, these small coins carry some of the biggest stories in Australia's history, and today we're uncovering their secrets, their rarity, and their jaw-dropping values. Let's moving on. First up, the 1938 Australian Threepence is a remarkable coin that has become a centerpiece for collectors who specialize in rare and historically significant Australian pre-decimal currency. Struck at the height of King George VI's reign, the 1938 Threepence holds a unique place in numismatic history, being one of the key early issues after the introduction of Australia's first native coin designs. The coin itself is composed of sterling silver, a blend of 92.5% silver and 7.5% copper, giving it both intrinsic value and a timeless appeal to precious metal investors as well as collectors. On the obverse, the coin proudly bears the left-facing effigy of King George VI, crafted by the acclaimed artist Thomas Humphrey Paget, whose designs became iconic across the Commonwealth during this era. The reverse displays the well-known design of 3 wheat stalks bound together, symbolizing prosperity and unity, flanked by the word Australia above and the date 1938 below. Collectors value this particular issue so highly because of its rarity and surviving high-grade condition. While millions of threepence coins were minted across different years, the 1938 issue was produced in limited numbers, and most of those that circulated suffered from significant wear due to daily use. To find one preserved in near-perfect condition, graded at the highest levels such as MS65 or higher, is an extraordinary event. This explains why, in the high-grade market, the 1938 Australian Threepence commands an astonishing value of around $95. Coins of this caliber often appear at major auctions, where seasoned collectors bid aggressively to secure one of the few surviving gems. Beyond its market value, the 1938 Threepence tells a broader story of Australia's economic identity in the late 1930s, bridging the gap between the Great Depression and the looming challenges of World War II. For serious numismatists, acquiring such a coin is not just about ownership, but about preserving a rare piece of national history that continues to rise in both prestige and value. Next up, the 1939 Australian Threepence is one of the crown jewels of Australian numismatics, widely regarded as one of the most valuable silver threepences ever struck. Its reputation is built on both its extreme rarity and its captivating backstory. In 1939, Australia faced growing tensions leading up to the Second World War, and coin production was inconsistent, with certain denominations minted in far smaller quantities. The 1939 Threepence belongs to this group of coins that slipped through with incredibly low mintages, making it elusive for collectors today. Like its 1938 predecessor, it features the effigy of King George VI on the obverse and the 3 wheat stalks on the reverse. But what elevates the 1939 issue is its sheer scarcity in uncirculated form. Many were melted down, lost, or simply worn away in circulation during the war years. High-grade examples, especially those certified by professional grading services, are nearly impossible to find. When they do appear, they create enormous buzz within the numismatic community. At present, the 1939 Australian Threepence holds a breathtaking high-grade market value of approximately $240,000, a staggering figure that reflects not only its rarity but also the feverish demand from collectors who wish to own one of the rarest small-denomination coins in Australian history. Auction houses in both Australia and overseas have witnessed fierce competition whenever a pristine specimen comes under the hammer, often attracting bidders from across the globe. Its appeal extends beyond numismatists, drawing interest from investors who recognize its stable growth potential as a rare tangible asset. The 1939 Threepence is more than just a small silver coin. It is a tangible artifact of Australia's wartime economy, a symbol of scarcity and one of the most sought-after treasures for serious collectors worldwide. Next up, the 1940 Australian Threepence is another fascinating entry in the series. Though it does not reach the dizzying rarity of the 1939 issue, it still holds immense value for collectors, particularly in higher grades. Struck in sterling silver during the second year of World War II, the 1940 threepence carries with it the weight of history, as Australia was heavily involved in the global conflict and the nation's resources were stretched thin. The design remained consistent with King George VI's dignified portrait on the obverse and the symbolic 3 wheat stalks on the reverse, a design that resonated strongly with Australians enduring the hardships of war, as wheat was a symbol of both sustenance and national economic strength. The survival rate of 1940 threepence coins in pristine condition is significantly lower than expected. Given the harsh conditions of wartime circulation, coins struck that year were widely used, and silver coins often suffered from scratches, bag marks, and general wear. This makes finding an uncirculated 1940 threepence in MS-65 or higher exceedingly difficult. The numismatic market has reflected this challenge, placing the 1940 Australian threepence at a commanding high-grade market value of around $55,000. While it may not eclipse the towering prices of the 1938 or 1939 issues, its value is still exceptional, and it represents one of the more underrated treasures of the series. Collectors who manage to secure a high-grade 1940 specimen understand that it embodies not just silver content or scarcity, but also a moment in time when Australia was deeply engaged in a world-altering war. Each surviving coin is a historical relic, linking the present to the stories of resilience, sacrifice, and survival during one of the most turbulent decades in modern history. Next up, the 1941 Australian threepence stands as a deeply historical coin that reflects both the nation's wartime struggles and its enduring coinage tradition. Struck at a time when Australia was fully embroiled in World War II, the 1941 threepence was produced under immense strain on resources, with the Royal Australian Mint working tirelessly to supply both domestic coinage and military needs. The coin itself was minted in sterling silver, continuing the standard composition of 92.5% silver and 7.5% copper, which had been the norm for Australian silver coinage since its introduction. On the obverse, the effigy of King George VI, created by Thomas Humphrey Paget, remains a powerful image of Commonwealth stability during uncertain times. The reverse continues with the iconic design of 3 interlocked wheat stalks, symbolizing Australia's agricultural prosperity, unity, and resilience. What makes the 1941 Australian threepence so remarkable is not its mintage numbers alone, since several million were produced, but rather the sheer difficulty in locating examples that have survived in high-grade condition. Most circulated heavily in an economy where silver coins were a lifeline during wartime rationing and scarcity. The few that avoided the rigors of daily use and retained their mint luster are now highly prized. Today, in the high-grade numismatic market, a 1941 Australian threepence can command values of up to $35,000, especially when graded at MS-65 or above. Collectors seek these coins not only for their rarity and pristine condition, but also for the powerful historical resonance they carry. Holding a 1941 threepence is akin to holding a piece of Australia's wartime economy in your hand, a reminder of resilience, sacrifice, and survival during one of the darkest chapters of modern history. Auction results and private sales confirm the increasing demand, as more collectors recognize the importance of this wartime silver issue. Its value continues to grow as top-quality specimens become increasingly scarce, ensuring the 1941 Australian threepence remains one of the most significant treasures for dedicated numismatists. Next up, the 1942 Australian threepence carries with it another extraordinary wartime legacy, but with its own unique context and significance. Minted during the height of World War II, 1942 was a year of extreme global conflict, and Australia's role was pivotal in the Pacific Theatre. The Royal Mint's operations faced ongoing disruptions, and to meet growing demands for coinage, Australian threepences from this year were struck not only at local facilities but also at overseas mints, including those in the United States. This unusual circumstance created a variety of mint marks and subtle design differences that make the 1942 issue especially appealing to specialists. The standard design remained the regal bust of King George VI on the obverse, flanked by the words Jorgifsan D. Gibra Omn Rix Fd Ind Impi, and the three wheat stalks on the reverse, a symbol of Australia's agricultural lifeline. Yet what makes the 1942 threepence so collectible is the combination of historical context, minting challenges, and rarity in superb condition. Many examples were used relentlessly in circulation, with wartime Australia heavily dependent on silver coins as everyday tools of commerce. The constant movement of these coins meant that high-grade survivors are exceedingly difficult to locate. Today, collectors and investors alike recognize the rarity of pristine examples, with the 1942 Australian threepence valued at approximately $40,000 in the high-grade market. Coins certified at MS65 or higher often spark fierce competition at auctions, particularly when linked to rarer mint mark. Varieties such as those struck at the San Francisco Mint with an S mint mark. The story of the 1942 threepence is not simply about silver or rarity. It is a tangible link to an era when Australia was fighting for survival alongside its allies. Each coin embodies the strain and resilience of a wartime economy, making it a powerful collectible that is admired not only for its monetary value but also for its historical weight. For numismatists, owning a 1942 threepence in superb condition means securing a piece of history that has endured through both war and time, and its continuing appreciation in value makes it a cornerstone of any serious Australian coin collection. Next up, the 1943 Australian threepence is one of the most intriguing coins of the wartime era, not only for its rarity in high-grade condition, but also for the fascinating story behind its production. By 1943, the Second World War was at its most intense stage, and Australia was fully committed to supporting the Allied war effort. This created enormous strain on the country's minting facilities, which were already operating at maximum capacity to produce the coins needed for both everyday commerce and military payments. As a result, production of Australian threepence coins for this year was spread across multiple mints, including the Melbourne Mint in Australia, the Denver Mint in the United States, and the San Francisco Mint, also in the US. This unusual arrangement makes the 1943 issue especially captivating to collectors, as it exists with several mint mark varieties that allow numismatists to explore the subtle differences between mints. The obverse of the coin continues to feature the left-facing effigy of King George, found by Thomas Humphrey Pagey, a strong reminder of Australia's close ties to Britain and the Commonwealth. On the reverse, the traditional three wheat stalks tied together remain, a design chosen during the George VI series to symbolize prosperity, unity and resilience, qualities that could not have been more relevant during wartime. What elevates the 1943 threepence into the realm of extraordinary collectibles is not its general mintage. Millions were struck across the three mints, but rather the rarity of finding coins in pristine, uncirculated condition. Wartime circulation was harsh, with silver coins enduring significant wear from daily use in rationed economies. High-grade survivors, particularly those certified by grading authorities at MS65 or above, are almost impossibly rare. These are the coins that command attention at auctions, and their high-grade market value reflects this scarcity. Today, the 1943 Australian threepence can fetch as much as $40,000 when preserved in top-tier condition, with the rarest mint mark variations achieving even more. Collectors prize these coins not only for their silver content or design, but also for the rich historical context that surrounds them. Owning a 1943 threepence in exceptional condition is akin to holding a piece of wartime history, a relic of global conflict, and a symbol of the resilience of both a nation and its people. It is a coin that appeals to both passionate collectors and serious investors, its rarity and story ensuring its place as one of the most sought-after pieces in the Australian Threepence series. Next up, the 1944 Australian Threepence continues this wartime narrative, yet it brings its own distinctive legacy. By 1944, the tide of World War II had begun to turn in favour of the Allies, and Australia's role in the Pacific theatre was critical. The demand for coinage remained high, not just within Australia but across territories where Australian troops were stationed, which once again placed pressure on the country's mints. As in the previous year, production of threepence coins was not limited to Australia, with overseas facilities also contributing to meet demand. This means that 1944 threepence coins can be found with mint marks, such as S for San Francisco, adding an extra layer of collectability and interest for specialists. The design remained unchanged, with King George VI's portrait on the obverse and the symbolic 3 wheat stalks on the reverse. Yet while the appearance may be familiar, the challenge of finding 1944 threepence coins in top-grade condition is formidable. Wartime usage continued to take its toll, and coins were often handled roughly, stored in bulk, or used in military payments, leaving very few examples untouched by wear or damage. The coins that have survived in near-flawless condition are today regarded as numismatic treasures. In the high-grade market, the 1944 Australian Threepence commands a value of around $35,000. A figure that underscores its rarity and desirability. Collectors are particularly drawn to examples with strong strikes, full mint luster, and minimal contact marks, qualities that set them apart in a series where such pristine survivors are almost never encountered. Beyond its market value, the 1944 threepence carries with it immense historical significance. It is a coin that circulated during a pivotal year in global history, when nations were beginning to believe in the possibility of victory after years of devastating conflict. Each surviving coin is a reminder of Australia's role in that victory, as well as a symbol of resilience during some of the most trying times in modern history. For numismatists, the appeal of the 1944 threepence lies not just in its silver content or monetary worth, but in its role as a tangible connection to a world at war. It is both a rare artifact and a collector's prize, destined to remain a highlight in any serious collection of Australian pre-decimal coins. Next up, the 1947 Australian Threepence emerges as a fascinating post-war issue, bridging the gap between the turbulence of the Second World War and the slow return to economic normalcy in Australia. By this time, the war had ended, yet the Australian economy was still in recovery mode, grappling with shortages of goods, materials, and labour. Coin production remained a crucial function of the mint, ensuring that commerce flowed smoothly as society rebuilt itself from the devastation of war. The 1947 threepence, like its predecessors, was struck in sterling silver, 92.5%, silver, and 7.5% copper, marking one of the final years before Australia transitioned to the lower silver content of 50% in 1946, onward for certain denominations. This fact alone adds special importance to the 1947 issue, as it represents one of the last in the traditional high silver content format that collectors treasure. On the obverse, the coin displays the familiar effigy of King George VI, facing left, designed by Thomas Humphrey Paget. His strong, confident profile had by then become a reassuring image for Australians, symbolising both continuity and stability after years of upheaval. On the reverse, the design of 3 interlocked wheat stalks, tied with a ribbon and framed by the words Australia and Threepence, once again emphasise themes of prosperity, unity, and the vital role of agriculture in the Australian identity. For collectors, The 1947 issue is particularly attractive because of its relatively low survival rate in pristine condition. While the coin was minted in decent numbers, circulation was heavy, and very few specimens were preserved untouched. The harsh realities of post-war daily use left most examples worn, tarnished or damaged. This scarcity in high-grade condition is precisely what drives the extraordinary market value of the 1947 threepence. Today, in the high-grade market, a superb example can fetch as much as $25,000, with MS-65 or higher specimens commanding premium attention. Auction houses report strong competition for such coins, with seasoned numismatists and investors alike eager to add this elusive post-war silver issue to their collections. Its appeal lies not only in its scarcity but also in its place as a coin of transition, produced at a time when Australia was moving from wartime hardship to peacetime growth. Each surviving gem is a reminder of resilience and recovery, making the 1947 Australian threepence both a financial asset and a historical treasure that continues to captivate collectors worldwide. Next up, the 1948 Australian threepence takes on an even greater aura of significance, representing a new chapter in Australia's numismatic history. By 1948, the world was reshaping itself in the aftermath of the war, and Australia was entering a period of modernization and economic expansion. Yet coinage remained a constant symbol of continuity. The 1948 threepence was struck not in sterling silver, but in the reduced 50% silver alloy, a composition change that had been introduced in 1946 due to the rising cost of silver and the pressures of wartime finance. This shift in metal content makes the 1948 issue particularly notable as it reflects the evolving realities of Australia's economy in the mid-20th century. The obverse once again features King George VI's portrait by Humphrey Paget, still a powerful and dignified image of the Commonwealth monarch. The reverse carries the classic wheat stalk design, which by 1948 had become an iconic and beloved symbol of Australian coinage. Despite its familiar appearance, the 1948 threepence is highly prized by collectors because of its extreme scarcity and high-grade condition. Coins from this period were heavily used in circulation, and the lower silver content alloy was more prone to wear and tarnish, further reducing the number of pristine survivors. Finding a 1948 threepence with sharp strikes, full mint luster, and minimal contact marks is a challenge that few collectors ever succeed in overcoming. As a result, the 1948 Australian threepence holds a commanding high-grade market value of around 35,000 exceptional specimens certified by professional grading authorities consistently achieve strong results at auctions, drawing interest not only from Australian collectors, but also from international numismatists who recognize its rarity and significance. The 1948 issue is more than just a silver coin. It is a symbol of Australia's post-war transformation, representing both continuity with the past and adaptation to new economic realities. For those fortunate enough to acquire one in top condition, it offers both a powerful investment and a tangible link to a moment when Australia was moving confidently into the modern era. Next up, the 1949 Australian threepence is one of the standout coins from the late King George VI series, highly valued not only for its scarcity and pristine condition, but also for the transitional role it plays in Australia's numismatic history. By 1949, Australia was firmly in the post-war recovery phase, experiencing both social and economic shifts as it rebuilt its industries, infrastructure, and global trade networks. Coinage remained a vital part of daily life, with silver coins like the threepence continuing to circulate heavily among the population. The 1949 issue was struck in the post-war reduced silver composition, 50% silver, 40% copper, 5% zinc, and 5% nickel, a change introduced in 1946 to reduce costs, reflecting the lasting financial pressures of wartime expenditures. For collectors, This alloy shift makes the 1949 issue especially significant, marking a clear departure from the sterling, silver standards of the earlier pre-war period. On the obverse, the coin features the now familiar bust of King George VI, designed by Humphrey Paget, which had become a symbol of stability for Australians across 2 turbulent decades. The reverse carries George Kruger, Grey's enduring design of 3 interlocked wheat stalks, tied at the base, with the date 1949 and denomination threepence arranged around them. This design, consistent throughout George VI's coinage, resonated deeply with Australians as a symbol of resilience, agriculture and prosperity. However, while the design may be familiar, the scarcity of the 1949 issue in high-grade form sets it apart. The majority of 1949 threepences entered heavy circulation, with the softer 50% silver alloy making them prone to tarnishing, wear and surface marks. Finding a fully lustrous, sharply struck specimen in mint state condition is exceedingly rare. Collectors have long recognized this difficulty, and auction results prove the strength of demand when such coins appear on the market. Today, a superb high-grade 1949 Australian threepence commands around €40 in the numismatic market. Such a price reflects not only its rarity and exceptional condition, but also its historical significance as one of the most sought-after post-war silver issues. For seasoned numismatists, the coin represents more than monetary value. It is a tangible artifact of Australia's economic evolution, capturing the transition from wartime scarcity to post-war recovery. Owning a 1949 threepence in near-perfect preservation is akin to securing a rare gem from a period of great national change, and it remains a cornerstone piece for collectors, building a world-class Australian coin collection. Next up, the 1950 Australian Threepence carries forward this legacy while also marking the beginning of a new decade in Australia's numismatic and historical journey. By 1950, Australia was experiencing rapid post-war development, with economic growth driven by agriculture, industry, and migration programs that reshaped the country's demographic landscape. The threepence, though small in denomination, played an essential role in everyday transactions, particularly in a time before decimal currency. Like the 1949 issue, the 1950 threepence was struck in the 50% silver alloy, making it part of the post-war reduced silver standard that characterized this later period of King George VI's coinage. The obverse features the enduring portrait of King George VI, his strong and dignified profile framed by the Latin inscription of his titles. The reverse once again displays the symbolic 3 wheat stalks design, which by this time had become an unmistakable emblem of Australia's pre-decimal coinage identity. While the design itself remained unchanged, what makes the 1950 threepence exceptional in the numismatic market is the rarity of high-grade survivors. Circulation during this period was particularly heavy, and silver coins were often subjected to years of use, storage in poor conditions, or mishandling. As a result, the number of coins surviving in uncirculated condition is strikingly low. For collectors, this scarcity translates into strong market values. In today's high-grade numismatic market, a 1950 Australian threepence in superb condition can achieve as much as $30,000. The coins certified at MS65 or higher by reputable grading services are especially sought after, and when they appear at major auctions, they attract spirited bidding from collectors eager to secure such elusive examples. Beyond its value, the 1950 issue represents a transitional moment, being among the last Australian threepences struck before the death of King George VI in 1952 and the subsequent ascension of Queen Elizabeth II. This historical positioning enhances its significance, making it not just a coin, but a marker of the end of one royal era and the beginning of another. For serious numismatists, the 1950 Australian threepence offers both historical depth and investment potential. Its scarcity and high-grade condition ensures strong long-term value, while its role in the broader story of Australia's post-war recovery and the transition toward a new monarch makes it a must-have in any advanced collection. It may be a small coin by size, but its historical weight and numismatic importance are immeasurable, and owning such a piece is akin to holding a silver relic from a defining moment in Australian history. Next up, the 1951 Australian Threepence is without question one of the most remarkable and historically significant coins in the entire pre-decimal series, a coin that has become legendary within the numismatic community due to its sheer rarity and staggering value. By 1951, the reign of King George VI was entering its final years, and the Royal Australian Mint was striking coins in the reduced silver composition that had been introduced. In 1946, consisting of 50% silver, 40% copper, 5% nickel and 5% zinc, while millions of threepence coins were issued in 1951 for circulation. What makes this year so extraordinary is the existence of an ultra-rare variety that has achieved mythical status among collectors. The obverse of the coin features the dignified portrait of King George VI by Humphrey Paget, while the reverse continues George Kruger Gray's iconic design of 3 interlocked wheat stalks tied with a ribbon, framed by the words Australia and Threepence. On the surface, the 1951 issue may appear ordinary, but for collectors, it holds a hidden treasure, the 1951 Threepence struck at the London Mint, identifiable by the rare PL, proof-like, issues and certain distinctive die characteristics. These particular coins were not intended for general circulation, but were struck in extremely limited numbers, either as presentation pieces or trial strikes. Their survival today is incredibly scarce, and they are considered one of the pinnacle rarities of the entire Threepence series. What elevates the 1951 Australian Threepence into the numismatic stratosphere is the astonishing value it commands in high-grade condition. Today, a pristine example of this rarity can achieve as much as $280,000 in the high-grade market, making it one of the most valuable Australian pre-decimal coins ever struck. Auction records show fierce competition. Whenever one of these elusive pieces appears, with collectors and investors from across the globe vying for the chance to own what is essentially a once-in-a-lifetime acquisition, the allure of the 1951 Threepence lies not only in its rarity, but also in its historical context. It was struck during the twilight of King George VI's reign, just a year before his death, and the ascension of Queen Elizabeth II, marking it as both the end of an era and the beginning of another. For numismatists, the 1951 Australian Threepence is more than just a coin, it is a holy grail. Its extraordinary value, scarcity, and historical significance combine to create a coin that transcends collecting and enters the realm of legend. To own one is to hold a piece of Australian numismatic history of the highest order, a coin that few will ever see in their lifetime, and even fewer will ever have the privilege to possess. It is small in size but monumental in importance, representing the pinnacle of rarity, desirability, and value in the Australian Threepence series. Next up, the 1952 Australian Threepence, while not reaching the astronomical heights of its 1951 predecessor, is nonetheless a highly desirable and significant coin, marking the final chapter in the King George VI Threepence series. Struck in the same reduced silver composition of 50% silver and 50% alloy metals, the 1952 issue holds special importance as the last threepence of George VI before his death in February of that year. Following his passing, coinage transitioned to feature Queen Elizabeth II, ushering in a new era for both Britain and the Commonwealth, including Australia. This makes the 1952 issue historically significant, as it represents the closing of one royal chapter and the anticipation of another. The obverse, once again, presents the stately portrait of King George VI by Humphrey Paget, a design that by 1952 had become deeply ingrained in the minds of Australians who had lived through both war and peace under his reign. The reverse, as always, carries the emblematic 3 wheat stalks, symbolizing prosperity and resilience, a theme particularly poignant as Australia entered a decade of growth and modernization after the hardships of war. While millions of threepence coins were struck in 1952, the majority saw heavy use in circulation, and few were set aside in pristine condition. The softer 50% silver composition was particularly susceptible to wear, making high-grade survivors exceedingly difficult to find. This scarcity in top condition translates directly into the coin's market value. Today, a superb 1952 Australian threepence in mint state condition commands around $35 in the high-grade market. Collectors and investors recognize its significance not only for its rarity and pristine form, but also for its role as the final issue of King George VI's coinage. The sentimental and historical appeal of this coin cannot be overstated. It serves as a tangible reminder of a monarch who guided the nation through some of its most challenging years, from the Second World War to the rebuilding of the post-war era. For numismatists, the 1952 Australian Threepence offers both investment value and historical depth. It may not rival the staggering rarity of the 1951 issue, but it holds its own as an essential coin for anyone seeking to complete a comprehensive collection of Australian pre-decimal currency. Its importance lies in both its numismatic scarcity and the moment it represents, the final bow of King George, weeks before the dawn of Queen Elizabeth II's long reign. As such, it remains a treasured piece of history, cherished by collectors who understand its place at the crossroads of Australia's numismatic and royal legacy. Next up, the 1953 Australian Threepence is one of the most historically significant and highly sought-after coins in the entire Australian pre-decimal series, not only because of its rarity but also because it represents a dramatic turning point in numismatic history. This coin marks the very first threepence struck under the reign of Queen Elizabeth II, following the death of her father, King George VI, in February of 1952. The coronation of the young Queen in June 1953 was a moment of immense global significance, and the introduction of her portrait on coinage symbolized the dawn of a new era across the Commonwealth. For collectors, this alone elevates the 1953 threepence into a league of its own, as it embodies both historical and emotional weight, an issue that is not just a coin but a commemorative piece of transition between two monarchs. The obverse features the first official portrait of Queen Elizabeth II by British sculptor Mary Gillick. Unlike the stylized effigies of her predecessors, Gillick's design presented the Queen bareheaded, wearing a laurel wreath rather than a crown, a fresh and youthful portrayal that resonated strongly with the public. It was elegant, simple, and symbolic of a new beginning for both Britain and the Commonwealth. On the reverse, the classic Australian design of 3 wheat stalks by George Kruger Gray remained unchanged, maintaining continuity with earlier issues. This design consistency highlighted the enduring values of prosperity and unity, which were especially meaningful during the optimism of the early 1950s. What truly makes the 1953 Australian Threepence extraordinary is its scarcity in the highest grades. The coin was struck in the reduced 50% silver alloy that had been adopted in 1946, and while millions were minted for circulation, very few survived in pristine, uncirculated condition. Circulation wear, environmental factors, and the softer alloy meant that almost all examples today are well worn. This makes mint state survivors exceedingly rare and immensely valuable. The few known specimens that exist in MS65 or higher are prized as jewels of Australian numismatics. Today, the 1953 Australian Threepence commands a staggering high-grade market value of around $140,000, making it one of the most valuable Elizabeth II-era Australian coins. Auctions featuring such pieces often generate global attention, with collectors and investors competing fiercely for the opportunity to own one of the first coins of Queen Elizabeth II's reign in superb condition. Beyond its numismatic value, the 1953 issue carries profound historical resonance. It is a coin of transition, bridging two reigns and symbolizing hope, continuity and renewal. For numismatists, it is more than silver and rarity. It is a tangible link to one of the most iconic moments of the 20th century, the rise of a young queen whose reign would become the longest in British and Commonwealth history. To own a high-grade 1953 threepence is to hold in one's hand a piece of that history, a coin that will forever remain a cornerstone of both Australian numismatics and Commonwealth heritage. Next up, the 1954 Australian Threepence continues this new Elizabethan chapter, though it holds a different place in the collector's world. Struck in the same 50% silver alloy, the 1954 issue carried forward Mary Gillick's graceful portrait of Queen Elizabeth II on the obverse, while the familiar 3 wheat stalks design remained on the reverse. By 1954, Australia was settling into post-war growth, and the novelty of the Queen's portrait on coinage had already become a symbol of stability, modernization and continuity across the Commonwealth. What distinguishes the 1954 issue, however, is its relative scarcity and high-grade condition. While not nearly as elusive or legendary as the 1953 issue, the 1954 threepence still faces the same challenges common to coins of this alloy: heavy circulation, softness of the metal, and environmental tarnishing. As such, while circulated examples are fairly common, those that survived untouched in mint condition are surprisingly rare. Collectors often underestimate this issue, but in recent years, its significance has grown as more collectors seek to complete sets of early Elizabeth II coinage. In today's high-grade numismatic market, a 1954 Australian threepence can command values of around $30,000 when preserved in exceptional condition. MS65 and higher examples are especially desirable and can exceed this figure in competitive auctions. While its value may not reach the towering heights of the 1953 issue, it nonetheless represents an important and undervalued piece of Elizabethan numismatics. For collectors, the 1954 threepence is not only a continuation of the new monarch's coinage, but also a reminder of a rapidly modernizing Australia, a country experiencing optimism, economic growth, and cultural change under a new Queen's reign. The 1954 Australian threepence may seem modest at first glance, but its historical role, relative scarcity in top condition, and strong market values make it a coin that cannot be overlooked. Together with its 1953 predecessor, it forms part of a crucial early chapter in Queen Elizabeth II's coinage legacy, making it a must-have for anyone pursuing a complete and historically rich collection of Australian pre-decimal silver. Next up, the 1955 Australian threepence is a coin that, while often overshadowed by its earlier Elizabeth II predecessors such as the legendary 1953 issue, still holds an important place in both Australian numismatics and Commonwealth history. Struck during the early years of Queen Elizabeth II's reign, the 1955 threepence reflects not only the continuation of her image on the coinage, but also the growing identity of Australia in the mid-20th century as it transitioned from post-war recovery into a new era of prosperity and modernization. The obverse of the 1955 coin once again features Mary Gillick's youthful and elegant portrait of Queen Elizabeth II. The bare-headed effigy with the laurel wreath remained a powerful representation of continuity and rejuvenation, a symbol of a young queen leading a rapidly changing world. On the reverse, George Kruger Gray's 3 wheat stalks design was retained, continuing its long-standing symbolism of agriculture, unity, and national strength. While the design remained consistent, it carried renewed meaning during the 1950s, a decade in which Australia's agricultural exports contributed significantly to its growing economic stability. What collectors find fascinating about the 1955 issue is its balance of availability and scarcity. In circulated grades, this coin is relatively common, as millions were struck for everyday use in commerce. However, when we turn to high-grade, mint-state examples, the story becomes entirely different. The coin was struck in the debased 50% silver alloy, a composition prone to tarnishing, surface abrasions, and environmental wear. As a result, very few pieces have survived in pristine, uncirculated condition with sharp detail, attractive luster, and minimal marks. For those rare survivors that have endured untouched, the numismatic market places an immense premium on their value. In today's high-grade coin market, a 1955 Australian threepence in superb mint-state condition can command values of around $25,000, with prices rising higher for coins graded at the top of the scale by third-party grading services. The rarity of such pristine coins makes them highly desirable to collectors seeking to complete Elizabeth II-era sets or to secure key investment-grade pieces from Australia's silver coinage. Beyond its numismatic worth, the 1955 issue also tells a broader historical story. This was a time when Australia was undergoing significant social and cultural transformation. Immigration was reshaping the population, industry was expanding, and ties to Britain remained strong but were slowly evolving toward a more independent national identity. The humble threepence, circulating in the hands of everyday Australians, became part of that story, an everyday coin that connected the monarchy, agriculture, and the nation's growth during a pivotal period. Today, in high-grade condition, the 1955 threepence is not merely a coin, but a rare artifact of that transformative decade, holding both historical and financial significance for serious collectors. Next up, the 1956 Australian threepence further extends this narrative, offering yet another glimpse into the numismatic and historical fabric of mid-century Australia. At first glance, one might consider it just another small silver coin with the same portrait and reverse design as the issues before it. But as with all coins, the story lies in the details that make this issue both collectible and valuable in its own right. The obverse still displays Mary Gillick's first portrait of Queen Elizabeth II, and the reverse carries George Kruger Gray's 3 wheat stalks motif. By 1956, Australians had fully adjusted to the new monarch's image on their coinage, and the design had become synonymous with the young Queen's reign. However, as with the 1955 issue, the real challenge for collectors lies not in finding circulated examples but in locating well-preserved, high-grade pieces. The softer 50% silver alloy used in these coins made them highly susceptible to wear, scratches, and surface damage, meaning that most surviving examples are in lower grades. Where the 1956 threepence truly shines is in uncirculated condition. Coins that manage to avoid circulation and retain their original mint luster, sharp detail, and clean surfaces are incredibly rare. These pristine survivors are highly sought after in today's market, and their scarcity has driven their values significantly upward. In the high-grade coin market, a 1956 Australian threepence can reach values of around $30,000, with certain top-tier examples pushing even beyond that benchmark depending on eye appeal and grading certification. This value is not simply attached to silver content, it is tied to history, rarity, and condition. The 1956 threepence represents Australia during a year of optimism and international recognition, most notably with Melbourne hosting the 1956 Olympic Games, an event that placed the nation firmly on the global stage. Though the coin itself was not issued to commemorate the Games, it circulated in the same year, making it part of that broader historical tapestry. For collectors, this adds an extra layer of significance. As the 1956 threepence becomes more than currency, it becomes a memento of a proud moment in Australian history. Together, the 1955 and 1956 Australian threepence coins form part of the essential foundation of Queen Elizabeth II's early coinage in Australia. While not as legendary as the 1953 issue, their scarcity in top-grade condition, and their historical context make them treasures of mid-20th century numismatics. Both coins, commanding values in the tens of thousands, are proof that even the smallest denominations can hold immense worth when rarity, condition, and history converge. Next up, the 1957 Australian Threepence is one of those fascinating coins that might seem modest at first glance, but, in reality, carries a powerful story of history, rarity, and enduring collector demand. By 1957, Australia was fully embracing its post-war boom. The nation was experiencing strong economic growth, driven by agriculture, manufacturing, and the beginnings of major infrastructure expansion. It was a time of optimism, modernization, and national pride. The threepence, though small in denomination and size, was an important part of everyday life, passing through the hands of millions of Australians daily. On the obverse, the coin retained Mary Gillick's youthful portrait of Queen Elizabeth II, showing her bareheaded with a laurel wreath, a design that had by then become iconic. The image symbolized vitality and continuity, resonating with a young Commonwealth that was finding its footing in a rapidly changing world. The reverse still bore George Kruger Gray's timeless 3 wheat stalks design, a motif that had been synonymous with the threepence for decades. These stalks were not merely decorative, they symbolized agriculture as the backbone of Australia's economy and reflected the unity of the Commonwealth nations. What makes the 1957 issue compelling for collectors is not that it was an unusual or error-struck coin, but that pristine, high-grade examples are astonishingly difficult to locate. Like other mid-1950s threepence issues, the 1957 was struck in the debased 50% silver alloy introduced in 1946. This composition was softer and more vulnerable to wear, meaning that coins entering circulation quickly accumulated marks, scratches, and tarnish. As a result, while circulated examples remain relatively common, mint state survivors are incredibly scarce. This scarcity and uncirculated condition drives the 1957 Australian Threepence into the higher value tiers of numismatics. Today, in superb high-grade condition, particularly when graded MS65 or above by professional grading companies, this coin can command a strong market value of around $25,000. Collectors prize it not only for its scarcity but also for its role as part of the formative years of Queen Elizabeth's reign on Australian coinage. For many, the 1957 threepence represents stability in a time of change, as Australia was both celebrating its economic success and beginning to define its own cultural identity, distinct yet connected to the Commonwealth. Owning such a coin in top condition is akin to holding a piece of that very era, an artifact that carries with it the optimism of the 1950s and the resilience of a young nation. It is a reminder that numismatics is not just about metal and minting, but about stories of people, culture, and history condensed into the form of a small silver coin. Next up, the 1958 Australian Threepence builds upon this legacy, offering yet another captivating chapter in the narrative of Australian coinage during the mid-20th century. At face value, the coin continued with the same familiar designs: Mary Gillick's portrait of Queen Elizabeth II on the obverse and George Kruger Gray's 3 wheat stalks on the reverse. But what collectors truly value lies beneath the surface: rarity, preservation, and historical resonance. The year 1958 was significant for Australia in many ways. The nation was still enjoying the post-war boom. Immigration was reshaping the population, and its role in the global economy was expanding. Against this backdrop, the threepence was a small yet constant presence in the lives of everyday Australians, a coin that circulated in markets, shops, and households, bridging social and economic divides. As with the 1957 issue, the challenge with the 1958 threepence lies not in finding circulated examples but in locating uncirculated survivors. The 50% silver alloy was particularly prone to wear, and coins that were stored improperly often toned. heavily or developed unsightly marks. This means that today, nearly 7 decades later, coins that have retained their original mint brilliance, sharp strike, and virtually flawless surfaces are exceedingly rare. These few pristine examples are the treasures that drive collector demand. In the modern numismatic market, the 1958 Australian Threepence in high grade, mint state condition can fetch values around 30,000, sometimes higher depending on eye appeal and third-party grading certification. For many collectors, it represents an essential acquisition for completing a high-quality set of Elizabeth II's early Australian coinage. But beyond its rarity and market value, the 1958 Threepence also connects collectors to the broader narrative of Australia's transformation during this period, a nation that was building confidence, developing its own unique voice, and moving steadily toward modernization. The 1958 issue is also a reminder of how quickly history can shift. Within just a few years, Australia would begin moving toward decimalisation, and coins like the threepence would fade from everyday use. Thus, the 1958 threepence is not just a collectible coin, but also a piece of a vanishing era, a tangible link to a time when silver coins jingled in every pocket and represented the lifeblood of commerce. Together, the 1957 and 1958 Australian threepence coins tell a story of endurance, scarcity, and historical resonance. They may seem like small pieces of silver, but in the world of numismatics, they are treasures, coins that embody a nation's history and the rarity that makes them so highly valued. Both remain cornerstones for serious collectors and continue to command respect and high market prices in today's collecting world. Next up, the 1959 Australian Threepence is one of those fascinating coins that combines the heritage of early Queen Elizabeth II coinage with the emerging awareness among collectors that Australia's pre-decimal system was nearing the end of its long journey. By 1959, the threepence had already been circulating for nearly half a century. First introduced in 1910 under King Edward VII, and although it was still widely used in everyday commerce, the winds of change were beginning to stir. Australia was considering decimalisation, a transition that would ultimately occur in 1966, and coins like the threepence were destined to become relics of an older era. On the obverse, as with earlier issues of the 1950s, the 1959 threepence features Mary Gillick's graceful portrait of Queen Elizabeth II. Her effigy, adorned with a laurel wreath instead of a crown, symbolised youth, renewal and dignity, and by this time had become instantly recognisable across the Commonwealth. On the reverse, George Kruger, Gray's enduring design of 3 wheat stalks bound together by a ribbon, remained unchanged. This motif was more than decoration. It was a symbol of agriculture's central place in the Australian economy, and for decades it had become the defining imagery of the threepence denomination. The true intrigue of the 1959 issue lies not in design changes, but in rarity, at the highest levels of preservation. Struck in the debased 50% silver alloy that had been introduced after the Second World War, the coins were vulnerable to circulation wear, surface scratches, and unattractive tarnish. As a result, most examples today are heavily circulated and hold little numismatic premium. However, the handful of coins that survived in untouched, mint state condition, coins with sharp strikes, full luster, and virtually no marks are considered treasures of the series. In today's numismatic market, a 1959 Australian threepence in such pristine high-grade condition can command values of around $28,000. Auction records reveal that collectors are increasingly turning their attention to these mid-20th century threepence coins, not only for their rarity, but also because they represent the twilight of the denomination. When a coin combines condition rarity with historical significance, the market responds with strong demand, and the 1959 issue exemplifies this perfectly. Beyond monetary value, the 1959 threepence is a coin that speaks to its era. It circulated at a time when Australia was flourishing economically. Immigration was reshaping the cultural fabric of the nation, and the sense of independence and modernization was growing steadily stronger. Each small coin was a part of daily transactions, carrying within it the story of an optimistic, forward-looking nation. To hold one today, particularly in mint condition, is to hold not just a piece of silver but a piece of living history, a connection to the Australia of the late 1950s. Next up, the 1960 Australian Threepence brings us to the final stretch of the denomination's journey. And while its design remained the same as in previous years, its historical significance grows ever more pronounced. By 1960, decimalisation was no longer just an idea. It was becoming a real and pressing part of government discussions. Within 6 years, the threepence would be gone, replaced by a modern decimal system that would redefine Australia's currency landscape. This makes every coin from this final decade of pre-decimal coinage especially meaningful for collectors. On the obverse, the coin still bore Mary Gillick's portrait of Queen Elizabeth II, a design that by 1960 had already taken on a sense of tradition and stability. On the reverse, the familiar 3 wheat stalks by George Kruger Gray continued to serve as a symbol of unity and prosperity. Yet what the 1960 issue represents is not simply continuity, it represents the closing chapter of an era. For everyday Australians at the time, the coin was still common and unremarkable. But for collectors looking back, it has become a token of a disappearing world. Like the 1959 issue, the 1960 Australian Threepence suffers from the same challenges of condition. Most were struck in the debased 50% silver alloy and quickly circulated, leaving behind countless worn examples. Finding one in heavily circulated condition is easy and inexpensive, but locating a pristine, high-grade specimen with full mint, brilliance and no significant marks is a far greater challenge. These are the coins that fuel collector enthusiasm and drive auction records upward. Today, a 1960 Australian threepence in top-tier mint state condition can command values of around $25. Its worth is not just in its silver content or even its rarity, but in the powerful combination of condition scarcity and historical importance. It represents the last years of the threepence denomination before decimalisation, making it highly desirable for those who appreciate both the numismatic and historical significance of Australian coinage. For collectors, the 1960 issue is a reminder of how coins often seem ordinary in their own time, but transform into treasures over the decades. When paired with the 1959 issue, it tells a story of a denomination that was slowly approaching its end, yet still circulating widely in the daily lives of Australians. Together, these coins form an essential part of any high-quality collection of pre-decimal silver, standing as enduring reminders of the transition from the old system to the new. Next up, the 1961 Australian Threepence marks yet another fascinating step in the journey toward the eventual conclusion of Australia's pre-decimal coinage system. By the early 1960s, the threepence denomination was nearing the end of its long service. Having first entered circulation in 1910 under Edward VII, it had been part of Australian daily life for over 50 years. But by 1961, change was firmly on the horizon, with discussions about decimalisation already well underway. For collectors today, this adds an extra layer of historical significance to the 1961 issue, as it represents one of the final moments in the life of a denomination that had been so closely tied to Australia's economic and cultural history. The obverse of the 1961 coin retained Mary Gillick's now familiar portrait of Queen Elizabeth II, her youthful image, crowned with a laurel wreath rather than the traditional crown, had been a symbol of renewal and stability throughout the 1950s. By 1961, however, the portrait carried a new sense of tradition. Having been used continuously for nearly a decade, it had become a fixture of everyday coinage. On the reverse, George Kruger Gray's design of 3 wheat stalks tied with a ribbon continued its long service as the motif of the threepence. The imagery of wheat remained highly symbolic, reminding Australians of the importance of agriculture as the backbone of the economy, and a source of national pride. What elevates the 1961 Australian Threepence into the realm of rarity and value is not its design, but the scarcity of pristine uncirculated specimens struck in the debased 50% silver alloy used since 1946. These coins were soft and easily damaged. Circulated examples are plentiful and common, but locating one that has survived in mint state condition with full luster, sharp strike and minimal marks is extremely difficult. Collectors have long recognized that the scarcity of such top-tier pieces makes them highly desirable and a cornerstone of any serious collection of Australian pre-decimal coinage. Today, in the modern numismatic market, the 1961 Australian Threepence can command values of around 26,000 in the highest grades, with certain exceptional pieces pushing even higher. This valuation reflects not only rarity in superb condition, but also the historical weight of the issue. For collectors, the coin is more than a piece of silver. It is a tangible artifact from the twilight of Australia's pre-decimal era, linking us to a time when coins like the threepence still jingled in every pocket, but were quietly approaching their final years of use. Next up, the 1962 Australian Threepence builds upon this legacy and holds a special place as one of the very last years in which the denomination was struck. By 1962, decimalisation was no longer just a distant plan, but a real and concrete transition that Australians were beginning to anticipate. Within 4 years, in 1966, the threepence would disappear entirely, replaced by the decimal 2-cent coin. For collectors today, this makes the 1962 issue an especially meaningful and highly collectible piece. The obverse still bore Mary Gillick's elegant portrait of Queen Elizabeth II, the same design that had graced all Australian coinage of the young monarch's reign up to that point. By this stage, the image was not only a symbol of youth, but also continuity, stability and tradition. The reverse continued with Kruger Gray's enduring wheatstalks design, which had become synonymous with the denomination itself. Although the design remained unchanged, its presence in 1962 carried new significance, as Australians knew the days of pre-decimal coinage were numbered. Like the 1961 issue, the 1962 Threepence faces the same challenges when it comes to condition rarity. The debased silver alloy, while practical for everyday use, was never conducive to long-term preservation in pristine condition. Most examples quickly wore down in circulation, and the passage of time has left the majority tarnished, scratched or otherwise impaired. As a result, the few surviving coins that remain in uncirculated condition with glowing mint brilliance are treasures for collectors. In today's high-grade numismatic market, the 1962 Australian Threepence can reach values of around $28,000. The demand for this issue lies not only in its scarcity and top condition, but also in its symbolic importance as one of the final issues before decimalisation. To own a high-grade 1962 Threepence is to own a piece of Australian history at a pivotal turning point, the end of one system and the beginning of another. It is both a collector's item and a historical artifact, connecting us to the final days of the threepence's long service in Australia's economy. Together, the 1961 and 1962 Australian Threepence coins form an essential part of the story of Australia's pre-decimal silver coinage. They may appear small and ordinary, but in reality, they represent the end of a chapter that had defined Australian currency for more than half a century. In high-grade condition, their market values reflect not just scarcity, but also the enduring fascination with the history and legacy of a denomination that once played such an important role in the everyday lives of Australians. Next up, the 1963 Australian Threepence stands as one of the most historically significant coins in the denomination's long history, for it belongs to the very final years before the grand transition to decimal currency. By 1963, The threepence had already served Australia faithfully for more than 5 decades, a tiny silver coin that carried enormous symbolic and practical importance. While it may have seemed like just another year of issue at the time, collectors now view the 1963 threepence as one of the essential last steps in the fading legacy of pre-decimal coinage. The obverse of the coin continued to bear Mary Gillick's graceful portrait of Queen Elizabeth Thet. By the early 1960s, this portrait had become deeply familiar to Australians. When it was first introduced in 1953, it was celebrated for its freshness, showing a youthful monarch with a laurel wreath, unadorned by crown or regalia. But by 1963, the design had grown into something more. It had become a symbol of continuity, an image that reflected both tradition and stability during a time of great change. On the reverse, George Kruger Gray's 3 wheat stalks bound with a ribbon remained steadfast. This design, in use since 1938, was by then more than a mere motif. It was an icon, representing agriculture, prosperity, and the enduring values of the nation. What makes the 1963 Australian threepence truly captivating for collectors is not its design, which had remained unchanged, but its place in history and its rarity in superb condition. By this point, the silver content of the threepence had long been reduced to 50%, a change made in 1946, and as a result, coins that entered circulation quickly lost their brilliance and often developed unsightly wear. Most examples from 1963 are today found heavily circulated, with scratches, toning, and surface damage that remove any premium value. The real treasures are the scarce examples that survived, untouched, those mint-state, coins that still glow with original luster, sharp detail, and virtually no marks from handling. In today's numismatic market, a 1963 Australian threepence, in top-grade mint-state condition, commands a market value of around $25,000. This valuation reflects not only condition rarity, but also the historical weight of the issue. Collectors understand that by 1963, decimalization was already a matter of public discussion, and the threepence's role in commerce was nearing its end. To own such a coin is to own a tangible reminder of Australia. As last year's under the pre-decimal system, a final chapter in a story that had begun over half a century earlier in 1910. Next up, the 1964 Australian threepence represents the final full year of regular issue for the denomination, and with it comes an undeniable sense of finality. When Australians held this coin in their hands in 1964, most would not have realized that they were witnessing the last moments of a coin that had been so deeply embedded in the nation's financial and cultural fabric. But for today's collectors, the 1964 threepence carries that poignant significance. It is one of the very last small silver coins struck before the dawn of decimalization in 1966, and as such it commands strong interest. The obverse again displayed Mary Gillick's youthful portrait of Queen Elizabeth II, though by now some Australians felt that the design was showing its age. By 1964, the Queen was no longer the young monarch of 1953, yet her early portrait remained in use until decimalization. This adds an extra layer of charm to the coin, as it reflects not only the endurance of a design, but also the continuity of tradition in a rapidly changing world. On the reverse, Kruger Gray's wheat stalks motif continued its service, its message of unity and prosperity still relevant, though now tinged with the knowledge that the denomination itself was nearing extinction. For collectors, the 1964 Australian threepence is an especially attractive target because of its dual significance. It is both a relatively common coin in circulation and a highly desirable rarity in mint condition. Like earlier issues, the 50% silver alloy made it vulnerable to damage, and most surviving coins show heavy wear. But for the select few that escaped circulation and remained pristine, the rewards are immense. In high-grade mint state condition, the 1964 threepence can command market values of around $27,000, coin certified. by professional grading companies at MS65 or higher are especially prized, with collectors competing fiercely for these last-of-series treasures. The 1964 issue, more than any other, symbolizes the end of an era. Within just 2 years, the pre-decimal system would be retired, and coins like the threepence would be withdrawn from circulation. Decimalization represented progress, but it also marked the passing of a tradition that had shaped Australian life for more than half a century. This makes the 1964 threepence not just a collectible, but a historical artifact, a final echo of the silver coins that had defined Australia's monetary system since its earliest days of federation. Together, the 1963 and 1964 Australian threepence coins represent the final curtain call for a denomination that had seen Australia through wars, depressions, recoveries, and transformations. They may be small in size, but in the world of numismatics, they are giants, reminders of a lost era, and treasures that command high values in today's market. To own them in top condition is to hold in one's hand not only silver but history itself.